persons they consulted all agreed that the journey by land along the Cordilleras by Santa Fe de Bogota, Popayan, Quito, and Caxamaraca would be preferable to the sea voyage and would furnish an immense fields for exploration. The predilection of Europeans for the cold and temperate climate that prevailed on the backs of the Andes gave us further weight to these counsels. The distances were unknown, but Humboldt was deceived with respect to the time it would take to traverse them on mules' backs. He did not imagine that it would require over 18 months to go from Carthagena to Lima. Notwithstanding this delay, or rather owing to the slowness with which he passed through the Cundinamarca, the provinces of Papan and Quito, he did not regret having sacrificed the passage of the isthmus for the route of Bogota, for every step of the journey was full of interest both geographically and botanically. This change of direction gave him occasion to trace the map of the Rio Magdalena to determine astronomically the position of 80 points situated in the inlands and country between Carthagena, Pampanga, and the upper course of the river of the Amazon and Lima, to discover an error in the longitude of Quito, to collect several thousand new plants, and to observe on a vast scale the relations between the rocks of sienitic, porphyry, and trachyte, with the fire of volcanoes. During the 6 days of their stay at Carthagena, their most interesting excursions were to Boca Grande and to the hill of Papa. A small portion of the hilly land separated the town of Carthagena and the inlet of Magna from the Ciagana de Tasca. These hills, some of which were more than 500 feet high, commanded the town. The Castillo de San Lorenzo was seen from afar, rising like a great rocky pyramid. When examined nearer, its fortifications were not very formidable. Layers of clay and sand were covered with bricks and furnished with a kind of construction which had little stability. The Cerro de Santa Maria de la Papa, crowned with a convent and some batteries, rose above the fort of San Lorenzo, and was worthy of more solid and extensive works. The image of the Virgin preserved in the church of the convent had been revered by mariners. The view from the Papa was extensive and varied, and windings from the currents of the coast gave it a peculiar character. Humboldt was assured that sometimes from the windows of the convent, and even in the open sea, before the fort of Boca Chica, the snowy tops of the Sierra Nevada de Santa Marta were discernible. In order to avoid the excessive heats and the diseases which prevailed during the summer at Carthagena, the travelers removed inland to the village of Turbaco. This small Indian village stood on a hill, and at the entrance of a majestic forest, which extended toward the south and the east as far as the canal of Mahates and the river Magdala. The houses were mostly built of bamboos and covered with palm leaves. Here and there, limpid springs rose out from the calcareous rock, which contained numerous fragments of petrified coral, and were shaded by the splendid foliage of Anacardium caracoli, a tree of colossal size, to which the natives attributed the property of attracting from great distances the vapors floating in the atmosphere. At the soil of Turbaco was more than 900 feet above the level of the ocean. A delightful coolness prevailed, especially during the night. The Indians of Turbaco, who accompanied the travelers, in their herbalization spoke of a marshy country situated in a forest of palm trees, and called by the Creoles the Little Volcanoes. They related that, according to a tradition still existing among them, this spot had formerly been in flames, but that a very pious man, a vicar of the village, had succeeded by his frequent aspirations of holy water in extinguishing the subterraneous fire. They added that since this time the fiery volcano had become a water volcano. From their long residence in Spanish colonies, the travelers were familiar with the strange and marvelous stories from which the natives eagerly recited to fix the attention of travelers on the phenomena of nature. Though they knew that these stories were of the Indians, that of the whites, the mulattoes, and the African slaves, and the reveries of a few individuals who reasoned on the progressive changes of the surface of the globe, gradually assumed the character of historical traditions, without giving any credit to the existence of an extent of country in a former state of ignition. They were conducted by the Indians to the volcanoes, and this excursion made them acquainted with phenomena much more important than any of those than they could have expected. The volcanoes were situated in the east of the village of Turbaco, in a thick forest abounding with balsam of tulu trees. The ground rose gradually 250 or 300 feet above the village of Turbaco. But as I was anywhere covered with vegetation, it was not possible to distinguish between the nature of the rocks that was reposed on the shelly, calcareous soil. In the center of a vast plain were 18 or 20 small cones in height not above 25 feet. These cones were formed of a blackish gray clay, and at the opening of their summits filled with water, and at approaching these small craters, a hollow but very distinct sound was heard at small intervals, 15 or 18 seconds, previous to the disengagement of great quantity of air. The force with which these air rose above the surface of the water led them to suppose that it underwent a great pressure in the bowels of the earth. Humboldt generally reckoned 5 explosions in 2 minutes, and this phenomena was often attended with a muddy ejection. The Indians assured them that the forms of the cones suffered no visible change in a great number of years, but the ascending force of the gas and the frequency of the explosions appeared to vary according to the seasons. He found by analysis made by means of both nitrous gas and of phosphorus that the disengaged air scarcely contained a thousandth part of oxygen. It was azotic air, much more pure than that which is generally prepared in laboratories.